Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks for hanging in there while we took care of some technical details and allowed some more people to come and join us. My name is Allison. As most of you guys know, there's a couple faces on here that I don't know who you are, but I am one of the owners of Skydive Vancouver Island, along with my husband, Gord, who's also on this call. And we are really excited to host another safety seminar series. And tonight is our instructors and coaches seminar safety presentation. And yeah, so welcome. The whole meeting is going to be, well, Danny's going to give a presentation. We'll get into those right now, but we are going to have opportunities for questions and answers. If you're wanting to ask a question, by all means, please, you can put it into the chat, either directly to myself where it says Skydive Vancouver Island and then -Allison. So I can ask them to Danny. If you are comfortable, just raise your hand. There's a nice little reaction tab on the bottom of your Zoom where you can raise hand, and then I will get to those questions as I can. And I think that Danny, throughout his presentation, will probably open up an area for conversation and questions. So without further delay, I'm excited to have Danny Grant as a presenter today. Danny started skydiving in 2010. He's since then accomplished 1,950 jumps roughly to date. I think he's pretty much obtained every CSPA rating except for the one that I want him to, which is the PFFI. So he'll be working on that hopefully. But some really highlighted ones of his ratings is that he is a learning facilitator for the Coach 1, JM, Jump Masters, and Coach 2s. He's also a Coach 3 in canopy piloting and wingsuiting. Danny is a current member of the CWC, or Coaching Working Committee. And he is the one who does all the ratings he does all the processing for the ratings. So he is the guy to really kiss butt to, actually. And if you have any questions about how they process ratings, he's the guy to ask as well. His love for the sport drives his passion to teach others, to be involved. I've known Danny for pretty much the last 9 years, and his energy, his enthusiasm, just it extends outside of just being a skydiver. He loves teaching other people to teach in this sport as well. So if you've had the pleasure to take a course with Danny or be out skydiving with Danny, you can definitely see why. He's got it all covered. Our other wonderful presenter would be Dan Whitman. Dan Whitman's wife, he celebrated his 50th birthday and she surprised him with a trip to the Dominican, and he's there right now. So unfortunately, Dan will not be joining us tonight because he's celebrating his 50th. And you can see by the picture, he's, obviously having a really good time. So Danny's going to be taking it all. Dan sends his love in regard to everybody. But certainly, yeah, I'm sure Danny will be able to cover a ton anyways. So without further delay, I am pleased to welcome Mr. Danny Grant. And Danny, now you can share your screen. And unmute yourself.
You ask so much of me, Allison. Thank you very much for the introduction. I don't Zoom a lot, so we're gonna, I want to share screen. So I'm gonna press that, and I want to share probably, is it that screen? No, that one. There. And it's really just gonna be me. Can you just see my big face? Did that work? I've got resounding silence, so.
We do not. I only see your face. I don't.
But now you see this.
There.
Excellent.
Now I see it. Wonderful.
All right.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you. Hey, I've got a beer, and I'm gonna give me 1 second. I'm gonna do one of these. All right, now I'm ready to go. All right, so I'm at the end of my presentation. That's probably no good. Okay, so instructors and coaches. This is a great topic for safety, a lot going on here. So real quick, I'm not going to do an introduction. I'm going to talk about why we're going to have this discussion, go over some personal safety ideas as a coach and instructor. A few of the little tidbits as to why we talk about student and novice safety, touch on all the things that happen outside of the skydive, because that's a really huge important thing for us as instructors, and then give some short discussions on the issues that the TNSC picked up out of the AIMS in terms of student problems throughout the past few years. Okay. As Allison said, please feel free to speak up, ask questions as we go. I definitely do not have 2 hours of content because, well, safety is actually really simple in this regard, and we shouldn't need 2 hours to talk about it. But if you guys have questions, you want to discuss things in particular, please bring it up. Please interrupt me. I tend to run on, and as much as I love my own voice, I love your questions better. So introduction, I was guessing Allison probably did this. She did a wonderful job. She makes me sound amazing. Thank you, Allison. So why are we talking about safety for students and novices? And the honest truth is that they make mistakes. All skydivers make mistakes eventually. Sometimes they hurt, sometimes they don't. Hopefully we can learn from them. And as coaches and instructors, we want to try our best to either prevent them from happening, and at the very least, prepare our students and novices to handle those situations that lead to mistakes before they actually occur. So, I mean, if you haven't done it, take 15-20 minutes after this presentation, go onto the CSPA website, find the safety management system, the SMS reports that Allison puts together each year with the TNSC. They are filled with wonderful tidbits of information of all the sad, shitty things we don't like to talk about all the stuff where shit goes wrong. Okay, last year, a quarter of the AIM reports that were submitted were related to students. I can only assume that there were more because we're getting better at submitting AIM reports, but I can only imagine that there's information missing there. But what we do know about a quarter of them relate to students, people who are trying to learn to get into the sport and hopefully do it safely. This number has been increasing over the past 3 years and the past 8 years, 32%. The number's going up. If you look at it year to year, there's some ups and downs as trends happen, as things happen like COVID. But a 3-year trend is positive, and that's honestly not something we like to see. It's not something that makes people want to come into our sport or stay in our sport. Okay. The categories where we're seeing a lot of student issues: not responding to the GCI properly, making low turns either because they had to or they just didn't know not to, not PLFing when they should, or actually the way the reports read, when they do PLF, they didn't get injured. Free fall control issues, they're not able to do the most basic stuff when they have to, and it causes problems. Dealing with malfunctions, we can't always prevent those, but we train them to deal with them. Flaring, huge. Landing, we all know that everything above a foot to 20,000 feet is actually fairly safe, but it's that last moment that hurts the most. We have students landing wrong, flaring late, hitting the ground in ways that they really shouldn't have to. And this all boils down to, really, in my eyes, decision making. That's the primary tool that we're trying to build within skydivers to make them safe, or at least safer, to prevent as many injuries as possible. Worth noting is these stats don't actually catch what we refer to as novices. There's the checkbox for students, for people who don't have a solo COP and higher, but there's nothing that labels people as novices. And the honest truth is we're all novices. So that other 75% of AIM reports, that's us, that's everyone else. And we're all novices. We can always learn to be better skydivers, a safer community overall. Okay, what can we do as coaches, instructors, or even just as community members, skydivers? Train them. That's really our primary purpose on the job zone. We take new people who are introduced to the sport and we train them. We teach them new things, both physically, in free fall, under canopy, on the ground, but mentally. We're going to talk about this a little later on. The mental skills are just as important. The other half of coaching and instructing is we have to test them. We train them to do a thing, but we have to confirm that learning has happens. And this has to happen constantly and consistently. This is how we build habits, hopefully safe habits. We observe them. We have to debrief them. I'm going to be blunt. If you're a coach and instructor and you're not spending the time at the tail end of a training session, at the tail end of a skydive, to go over everything that's happened and how we can improve, how we can get better, or how we move on, then you're not doing your job as a coach or instructor. You have to have good debriefs. And probably the biggest tool we'll have, and I'm going to talk about it right away, is role modeling. It's a weird thing. You may or may not have noticed it, but you are a product of all the coaches and instructors that you've had in the past. Gray Bush is on this call right now. I do things that I watched him do over and over and over again, and they're part of my own routine. And at no point was it ever taught to me. I just saw it, observed it, and started mimicking it because at the time I thought he was Sky God. I've learned otherwise, but he was my idol. He was my role model. That is one of the biggest tools that we can have moving forward into this season and all other seasons to create safe skydivers. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about personal safety. Seems a little silly to think about the fact that, well, if I keep myself safe, I'll keep others safe. But it really honestly is the truth. People will mimic you. Your novices, your students will mimic you. Junior skydivers, junior coaches, junior instructors around the drop zone will mimic you. We all naturally look up to those around us and say, hey, you do a great job. I want to be like you, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. One of the best things we can do in this sport is be a great role model. Guys, stop texting me on the side. Really distracting. I'm going to take my watch off. So first and foremost, man, it is April. I've been out to drop zones 3 times now. 2 of those 3 times, actually, no, 3 out of 3 times, it's been shit weather. Trying to get current, trying to get in the air, do the jumping. You've got to understand your limits and your student limits. Thinking specifically for JMs, PFFIs, TIs, be ready to take care of yourself on a skydive before you have to take care of someone else. As tempting as it is to, jump right in and start doing the instructions, start doing the working jump, start getting paid, building the jump account, whatever it is, make sure you're ready to handle situations for yourself before you have to now tack on whatever interesting things your students may want to do. We've all seen them. Okay. Some of us have been very lucky. We've got to travel south into sunny environments, keep current through the year, but just keep in mind what your limitations are. If it's been 6-7 months since you've jumped, get out, do some hop and duck pops, do some high pulls, do some small group jumps, break off the rust, get current, and then be ready to continue your training with your students. And this includes all the basics. You're going to hear me saying a lot of things that sound like, well, duh, of course you do that. It's just skydiving. Well, that's just it. It is just skydiving. And the key to skydiving is good, safe procedures, okay? Proper preparation. And if you haven't touched your gear in 3, 4, 7 months, get out there, get your hands on it, get familiar with it again. Do your gear checks consistently. Get used to what the weather is like this time of year and as it changes through the year. Here in BC, we see all sorts of weather as the season moves on. Out east, very similar. The prairies, I don't know, just assume it's flat, windy, and cold all the time, but your weather changes. Keep on top of it. Everything that you do as a coach is the information you need to move or pass on to your students and novices. So be current with it all. As tempting as it is to just jump into everything we always do, planning jumps, getting in the plane, getting a jump run, just go and do it because it's old hat. Spend the time on the ground to plan good skydives, plan good training sessions. Again, we're trying to pass along good habits. If we cut corners, students and novices will cut corners, and it's just a degrading return end of the time. And take the time on the ground to get to know your students and novices. If you're the instructors, the JMs, the PFFIs, you're going to see new faces. That's what we always do. We see new people come and go. If you're the coaches out there working with the novices, these might be people that you saw all through the winter, skiing, snowboarding with them. Maybe you traveled with them down south, or maybe it's people you haven't seen in 8 months. Life changes, things change. Get to know your students and novices again. Get to understand what their goals are, what skills they've maintained or not maintained, what they remember, don't remember. Spend the time on the ground. The honest truth is, man, the skydive itself is so freaking expensive, especially when they're getting training. Spend the time on the ground to be effective, because that time is effectively free. It costs no one anything except time. And get a technical refresher, okay? You know, some of us have been coaching for 1 season, some of us been coaching for dozens and dozens of seasons. But like everything else in the sport, things change. You know, go revisit the COP requirements. See if anything's changed in those aspects. I'll tell you right now, nothing has. So it's kind of nice this year. Everything for solo A, B, C, D is consistent as to what it was last year. Okay, but that doesn't mean that your drop zones training programs have not changed. Okay, hopefully your drop zone senior instructors have put some time in, thought about what worked, what didn't work. Maybe they've already looked at the SMS reporting. Maybe they've made tweaks to the training programs that they use at the drop zone. Get a refresher on those. Again, it may have been months since you've actually had to teach someone something to these programs. Skim through the guides, skim through the PIMs, just bring everything back up to the surface. If you're one of those lucky skydivers who gets to bop around to different drop zones, be aware of what's changed at certain drop zones and what hasn't changed at others. One of the best things you can do for your novices and your students is train them consistently. Train them to the way that they're going to be consistently trained at the drop zone. And that does change drop zone to drop zone. Understand the program that you're working under. Other side of that, student and novice safety. It's an interesting thing when you work with students and novices, is because they don't know what they don't know. And I'll go back to the fact that we're all novices. I don't know what I don't know. And I hope one day someone will point that out to me and teach it to me and give me an opportunity to learn it. Okay. For the JMs, the PFFIs out there, the GCIs, the SSIs, you're going to see new students. And honestly, in my opinion, those are some of the easiest ones to work with, right? We start from zero. These are people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all different reasons to be here. It's easy. Do what you do. Start from that 0 point and be professional. Okay, use your skills grids, use your training programs. Don't go off the beaten course. Don't make things up as you go. Okay, CSBA's put out the skills grids, the drop zones pretty much all have their own built training programs for a reason. Being consistent, so we can deliver a consistent product, so that we can train safe, consistent skydivers. You see it up here twice on the slide. I'm going to keep saying it as this presentation goes on. Emergency procedures on every jump. Okay, going back to decision making, it's the biggest tool that we can provide to our students and novices to make them safe skydivers. And that means constant review, looking and touching your handles, talking through different scenarios on the ground, in the plane, during the debrief. What if this happens? What will you do? We need to test those little bits of information all along the way. Okay, returning students, that's where things get a little more complicated. There's been questions asked recently regarding technical recommendation 3.11, which you see in front of you. What does retraining mean for a student? Okay, if you've got a student who's, you know, at this point, if it's been 60 days since their last jump, it's probably been closer to 120 days, 180 days, 6 months since their last jump, depending where in the country they are and when they started. That's a long time to try and remember a lot of information that they haven't put into practice. You think about who a student is. They're probably sub 10 jumps, sub 15 jumps. They maybe only have 2, 3, 4, 5 jumps, right? They're not don't take this the wrong way. If someone on here happens to be a student, they're not really skydivers. They're trying to be skydivers. We have to review what they know, retest what they know, retrain basically everything, and bring up the EPs on every jump. We have to be thorough. Don't make assumptions just based on numbers, just based on logbook entries that, hey, this person was trained on a thing, they've done a thing once, I just need to brush over it and mention it. It's been at least 2 months. In reality, it's probably been 4 to 6 months. You're basically starting from scratch. Take the time on the ground to be thorough, to be confident, to be sure that this person is ready for that next jump that they're going to do. I always fall back on this statement of understand what your drop zone policy is. It's one thing to understand the BSRs and the technical recommendations and your own experience, but something we want to make sure we're providing across the country is consistent training. And that's difficult to do drop zone to drop zone, especially when you think of how large our country is. But within a drop zones bubble, within a drop zones program, we need to be consistent. So when it comes to these returning students, figure out what the drop zone policy is. Do they have a returning student program? Do they have a recurrency training program for their students? Or are they just sending them back to first jump? So what is it that the drop zone is expecting to do with these students so that you can be consistent with that? Okay. Novices gets a little trickier, gets a little hazier. We're all novices. 1900 plus jumps. I still come to the drop zone and go through all my basics because the basics are what keep us safe. There's a reason we learn to arch and pull handles on our first jump, because that's what keeps us safe. That's what is the foundation of our skills. Okay, just like any skydiver, because novices, unlike students, I would say are in fact skydivers. They're certified. They're tested. They've proven themselves. We need to get them current, just like yourselves. Review them, retest them, retrain them. What do they know? What can they do? What can they repeat back to you? Can they still plan their jumps, check their gears, check their reserve, check their handles? Is that information still there? Whether this is a solo with 10 jumps, earned it just before the winter, or maybe they earned it over the summer down or over the winter down in Mexico. I don't know. People skydive everywhere. Take the time at the beginning of the season to get to know your novices, get to know your students. Where are they at? What do they know? What can they do? Where do we need to train them? Check their EPs on every jump. Touch your handles. What will you do in this event? If the plane or if the pilot says get out at 2,500 feet, what are we going to do? It's always about that constant review. It's not because everything's going to happen on every jump. It's because once in 1,000 jumps, something's going to happen. You need to be ready for it. I had my first malfunction the other week, first full malfunction the other week. No main parachute. I never done that before, but it's that constant review of here's my handles, here's my check. I pulled, what is my timing like? We have to build that habit of review into our skydivers. And a big part about that is setting goals. And that's going to lead us into this next section here. Okay. Everything outside of the skydive. Typically speaking, coaches, instructors across the country, we're really good at actually teaching people to skydive, right? That's how we produce world champions and people who are part of world teams and people who go around and teach other people to skydive and compete in all the disciplines. There's a reason why there are great skydivers coming out of our programs. We're really good at teaching skydiving, but we tend to forget about everything outside of the skydive. And I'm talking specifically about those two bookend columns of the skills grid. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, man, go Google PIM1 skills grid CSPA, pull it up, get familiar with it, and don't tell me you had to do that because I'll be disappointed. Just do it. But preparation and technical knowledge are these massive columns of these itty bitty little tasks that everyone loves to forget about. And as we go through coming up here, addressing the issues that students run into, that novices run into, that lead to AIM reports, that lead to injuries, that do lead to fatalities, it comes down to decision making. How do I know when to make a decision? How do I know what decision to make based on the information that I have in the situation that's occurring? And it all comes down to preparation and technical knowledge. These columns are massively involved in just the tiny bits of information that we have to practice over and over and over so that they're prepared in our own individual toolboxes for those one moments where, hey, I don't have a main parachute. It's 2,200 feet. What do I do? Pull my handles, go to reserve, right? So that we don't have to sit and think, so that our students don't have to sit and think and consider when they're under time crunches and safety is concerned. I'm not going to read this list. I assume most skydivers can read. Go for it. If you have trouble with that, I don't know, reach out to your 6th grade teacher. I'm sure he or she would love to help you. Okay, so let's talk about the actual issues that students have run into. This is going back to the AIM reports over the past couple of years, and what was submitted as problems with students and novices. Okay, free fall control. It's funny to think that students end up in situations where they're not in control of what they're supposed to be doing. It's inevitable. We're going to run into it. It's a statistics game. It happens. But it really comes back to reinforcing the basics. Let's not forget the basics about what we teach them. Okay. I don't know, half hour into your first jump course, arch. Head up, hips out, arch. Should stop all your spinning, should keep you stable, should keep you belly to earth. Just because it's simple, just because it's something they do every jump, doesn't mean it's something we can forget about. Reinforce it, jump to jump, day to day, weekend to weekend. Consider to yourself as the instructor, as the coach, the balance of progress versus performance. We often end up in those situations, reviewing video, talking to other instructors. How good is good enough? Like, got off the plane, there was a bit of a turn, he got the, like, it wasn't that bad. Maybe he's ready to go on to the next jump. I'll be blunt. If you're thinking, then it wasn't good enough. You as the instructor, you as the coach have to be confident in your novice and student's ability to do the task that was assigned, trained, practiced, attempted to execute in order to push them on, especially on the student side. The students don't know what they don't know. They don't know what good enough is. They don't know what good is. They don't know what bad is. That's on you to decide. Yes, the sport's expensive. Yes, it can be really demoralizing to have to repeat a jump 2-3 times because they're just not getting it right. But they have to get it good enough for safety's sake. It's fine to hold people back if you feel like the performance isn't there. Of course, we don't need perfection all the time, but we need to meet a certain threshold with each activity, each skill before pushing them on. Because if we allow things to cascade through progress that aren't quite good enough, or we thought that maybe they were just good enough, we're not reinforcing a foundation of skills to produce good, safe skydivers. Okay. As a coach, as an instructor, consider what an appropriate jump is for your students and novices. This comes back to knowing your students and novices, who they are, where they're at, how they have been performing, how they have been progressing. You're going to run into the rock stars that can take on 6, 7, 12 new things every jump, and they'll just cruise on through because they were born to do sport. And then you're going to run into the single task wonders. Just arch on this jump. Just check your altimeter on this jump. Just pull on time on this jump. Do nothing else. Just one new thing and everything remains the same. But you as the coach, you as the instructor have to identify that and be honest with yourself and your students and novices to ensure that we're planning and executing appropriate jumps for their progress level. Okay, malfunctions. It's a funny one. We can't stop them all. Are they packing errors? Are they body position errors? You can take that up on the packing mat with a beer with the packers. They happen. Malfunctions happen. It could be air gremlins, could be packing problems. I don't know. Maybe we can prevent some of them. Maybe the packers are right. Maybe the body position is part of the problem. You know, when you got the student who does this free fall right through till pulling and keeps going, like, yeah, maybe we can blame the 44 line twists on them. It happens. Okay, maybe we have to go back to this discussion and should they have been there, but we can't prevent them all. We can maybe prevent some. Okay, but what we can do, what we can train, what we can execute as coaches and instructors is the response to them, their decision-making capabilities, their muscle memories of looking, touching, knowing the correct order and timing on every jump for every COP at every opportunity and being consistent with it, right? Every skydiver should look at their handles and touch them on every skydive multiple times before you're on the plane, in the plane, before you exit the plane. Even under canopy, it's not a bad idea seeing where they shift to. In the realm of malfunctions, all we can do is rehearse, review, and train, because it's that little bit of information that we rarely use, that we rarely have to execute on, unless you do crew. But when we need it, it needs to be available and it needs to be upfront and ready and practiced. Okay. Thinking about COPs, you know, as instructors, as coaches, we need to be thinking about how handling malfunctions changes through the COPs. I'm not going to go super in depth on that, but understanding that, hey, solos are jumping alone, things like canopy collisions are less likely, but still possible. Thinking congested landing patterns. As we get into A and B, we can start doing two ways and multi-ways. We start getting into other disciplines like crew, like four-way and eight-way and free flying. What are the different ways that malfunctions change as they progress through their COPs? This goes back to technical refresher. Go back through, refresh yourselves on what changes through each of the COPs. What are they learning? What new situations are they being entered into? How does that affect them? Okay, for the SSEs out there and the C2s, really any instructor, go find the sport canopy endorsement and the emergency procedures review manuals. They are great. They're filled with dozens and dozens of pages of way too much information. Get familiar with it, because it's your job as the coach and instructor to slowly pass that along. So hopefully by the time that they need to handle a malfunction, it's upfront, it's ready, the knowledge is there. Okay, landing issues. Here's the big one. 24% of AIM reports were students, and over half of those dealt with landings. These are people hitting shit, hitting the ground hard, landing downwind, damn near hitting other canopies, just causing mayhem in the landing area and on the ground. It's no new information here. Train it, practice it, test it. Ask them the questions. How many flares do you have? When are you going to start flaring? What does your pattern look like? What do you do if there's a cow in the landing area? What do you do if someone is head on head with you on landing area? What do you do if you're not going to make it to the landing area? What do you do if you're going to hit the massive 26,000 square foot building next to the landing area? These are not things that are part of every jump plan. If they were, we'd never actually get to jump. But they're part of the possibility of every skydive. So we have to pick and choose and feed them back to our students and novices to keep that information just a little fresh. Like it says, train it, practice it, test it. Okay. Landings, the only way you can coach landings is to see landings. I don't know how many landings you saw of your students and novices last year. If it's under 100%, I would urge you to do better. Okay. If you're working with someone, especially if someone is spending their money for your time and input, spend it on the ground before the skydive, train it, test it, practice it, brief them in the plane, do your visualizations all the way from exit to landing, watch them land, give them feedback on that. Okay. Again, the majority of incidents and accidents for students are occurring right here above the ground. If you're not watching this, you're not doing the full job as a coach or instructor. See it, analyze it, coach it, and instruct it. Okay. Watch every landing for every novice and every student you work with. That said, if you got free time with the drop zone, watch even more landings. The amount that you can learn by watching people land canopies well and land canopies poorly is absolutely immense. Okay. Ground control issues. This one's always fun. I know all the GCIs out there absolutely love using the radio, and those of us who have GCI and don't like doing GCI feel that way for reasons. It's a tough rating to have. Okay, but you're part of a team. Constant review goes a long way. Okay, I'm looking at the JMs and the PFFIs, especially the PFFIs out there who do double duty as GCI for the students they work with. Okay, work as a team. If you've got students in front of you on the ground, approaching the plane, in the plane, just before, or not just before exit, but before the door opens, do the review. I don't care if your drop zone does a not yet, flare, 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 one big one, or if it's stage flares along the way, make a review of it before the jump happens and make that review constant. Constantly remind them, because, you know, in theory, we've got a minimum of 10 jumps to get them ready to fly that parachute on their own. Flying a parachute's easy, but landing it, that can hurt if it's done wrong. Constantly review that information. Work with your GCIs. Hey, if you're the JM and you can't see every one of your students land, someone can. It's the GCI on the ground. Maybe it's another coach on the ground. Use the resources available to you so that you can provide good debriefs, good feedback, good goal setting moving forward for your students and novices. Okay, know what they know. Especially for you coaches and instructors who bop around to different drop zones in your area, around your country, know what they know. We all know how to flare a canopy. We all know how to fly a pattern. But it's all about language. It's all about communication. What were they taught to do? What were they taught to listen to? It's not enough that you know a thing and you have words to communicate a thing. You have to know what's happening on the other side of that equation. What were the students taught to expect? What were they taught to hear? Again, this goes back to being consistent at the drop zone level. Be consistent with what they were taught and what you were teaching them. At the same time, learn the gear. I'm lucky as a JMLF, I get to go to a bunch of different drop zones. I get to try on a bunch of different student gear and fly a lot of different massive rat-bagged canopies. Learned a lot over the years doing that, the way different gear reacts. But for you as the coach, as the instructor who is working with people who is flying this gear, I promise you, your gear is nothing like what they're dealing with. Be familiar with it, whether it's watching it or actually going and jumping it, talking to other senior people who have jumped it and have a familiarity with it, because you need to know what they know. Even at the drop zone level, not all gear is consistent. Be aware of what your students are jumping and how it flies and how it flares, because as the coach, as the instructor, it's on you to help pass that information along, especially if it's new gear to the student or novice. Talked about basics, always coming back to basics, communication. We're all using radios, very simple device, but it can be very easily misused, okay? Be clear, nice, clear, loud language, keep it simple, keep the language down to what they were taught. Whether you're a drop zone, that's turn 90, left degrees, fly straight, or it's left turn, left turn, left turn, left turn, fly straight. Use what they were taught, be loud, be clear about it. And consider language. It's a thing that's growing over time. To give a jump master or PFFI example, lots of drop zones have moved away from, are you ready? Okay, now climb out. No, it's just climb out or climb out all the way, being clear with what you want, taking away unnecessary options. On radio, one that I would love to see people stop saying is the word stop. Because we've seen it, not often, but every maybe once, twice a year, you see it. A student hears the word stop, does the quick process and goes, I can stop a canopy. Hands all the way down and damn near stall it 300 feet off the ground. Or what the instructor wanted was fly straight. So consider the language you're using, and also consider, there's no polite way of me saying this, consider the language that your student speaks. Is English their first language? Is French their first language? Is it something else? Are you using words that communicate well to the individual you're working with? Okay, flaring. Over 50% of the student aims were related to landing, were related to flaring, or related to hitting the ground too hard. Anyone who's had the pleasure of recently flying, I don't know, anything over 200 square feet can probably scratch their head and go, well, how? How do you hit the ground going too fast, too hard under something that big? And it all comes down to technique. I said it once before, I'll say it again. Get to know the gear that your students are using. How does it react? Is it a one-stage flare, two-stage flare, three-stage flare? What are they taught? What works well? Okay, that's technique. Reviewing that constantly, going through what they were taught. When are you going to flare? Is it 15 feet off the ground, 20 feet off the ground, one system height? What is it that your drop zone teaches? What is it that works with the gear? Timing, that's always the hard one. And it's really the one that majority is learned through experience. Okay, you can get conditions on the day. Is it hot and humid? Is it cold and dry? Is this a 260-pound student or is this a 110-pound student? How strong are they? Have they had any recent injuries? Is there a slight downhill or uphill to the landing area? This all affects timing. For the GCIs out there, best way to go about this is to stand on the landing area, watch other people land, watch more senior GCIs land their students, get familiar with the area, get familiar with the gear. You're hearing a lot of repetition. It's all about getting familiar with the tools we have on hand. That comes down to watching everything. More landings, students, experienced people, tandem instructors. Watch everyone land in all sorts of conditions. See the different techniques, see the results that they get out of it, the good and the bad. And especially watch students and novices land. There's people out here who have instructed way longer than I have, and I'm sure we've all seen those same repetitive habits that students and novices develop that often end in those bumps and bruises, and hopefully nothing worse. And I'll go back to role model. I'll be honest, I fly a tiny canopy. I like to go fast. Sometimes I fuck it up. When you're working with students, when you're landing in front of students, role model good landings, good landing decisions. This comes right down to flying a good pattern. Okay, finish your flare. As much fun as it is to, drag your foot through the grass and slide it in, going fast and with that half flare. That's what your students are going to want to do. That's what your novices are going to want to do. Okay. If we're teaching them to do A and then showing them B, it raises questions to them. Role model what you want to see in your novices and your students. Okay. big one out there that a lot of canopy courses are harping on now is flaring our center line, right? Flare down here, as cool and comfortable as this looks, flaring here is powerful for those bigger canopies, for those learning skydivers. Learn to do it yourself. Honestly, I find it to be a much more powerful, productive flare. So I'm distracted by that, the cat who wants my drink. And man, stand it up. I harp on EGR holders, I harp on instructors, I harp on coaches for this. You're landing in front of your students and novices, stand it up, make it look good, show them what can be done. And the PLF, this has come up in a few AIM reports, this comes up in discussion a lot of times around drop zones. Do you teach it? Do you review it? What's better? And I'm going to keep it simple. I'll give you the option of rolling wrists and ankles versus smashing tailbones and cracking spines. I know which one I'll take every time. I will gladly spring all my tiny joints instead of slamming my ass into the ground. And that is the PLF. You will always walk away from a PLF. You'll be battered, bruised, maybe a little broken, definitely a load of shame on your back, but you'll walk away from it. Teach it, review it, be proficient at it. Low turns is a funny one to see come up in student AIM reports because it's almost entirely unnecessary. And why did they do it? And this comes down to that technical knowledge. Why are they making turns low to the ground and hitting the ground? Okay, this is technical knowledge. Were they taught the flat turn? Are they aware of the flat turn? Where does that come into their learning? Okay, making early decisions, dealing with traffic and obstacles, the decision making, the early planning. In my experience, most low turns come from the mindset of I've got to land into the wind. I must land into the wind. If I'm not into the wind, it's not going to work. I can't land crosswind, and that's not true. Okay, you look at your 4 requirements here for a good landing. Level wing. Wing's got to be above your head for a good landing. If it's not, it's probably going to hurt a bit. Hopefully you're having a level wing above your head in a clear area. That'll improve things. If you really get your head on your shoulders, you're gonna slow the canopy down however you can so that you come to the ground a little slower. And then last, into the wind. Okay, it's not an intuitive list, especially when generally in a first jump course, we're teaching you're going to fly a box pattern and land into the wind because the guy on the radio or the lady on the radio is going to talk you through that. But this decision making, this early planning process is something that has to be taught. It has to be coached. It has to be reviewed and tested constantly. So when the day comes that they need it, it has to be there. Which is this constant review. Always asking the what if. I'm not saying go over every what if scenario on every skydive. That would be ridiculous. But touch on them constantly. Cycle through them. Make sure your students and novices are exposed to that information regularly over time. Again, so that when they need to use that information, make those decisions under time crunches, they are able to. Okay. Obviously, we're reviewing things we want to do on the skydive. We're going to get out at 10 grand and do 3 front loops and pull by 3.5. Great. What happens if you're unstable at 3.5? What happens if your main parachute doesn't come out? What happens if you have malfunction? What happens if you just have line twists? Okay. Cover all phases of the skydive when you're doing review. We get lazy with this. I'm guilty of it myself. The skydive starts on the ground, ends on the ground, and we have to consider the whole process. Test them on things that they do know, they should know. How do you arch? How do you deal with a malfunction? Touch on things that they might not know. What do you do when the plane engine is on fire? Do it on the ground, do it in flight, do verbal mental rehearsals. None of this is new. All of this exists in the skills grid. All of this exists in the coaching courses. None of this is new. There's no brand new information out there to make you better coaches. It's all basic. We just need to be sure that we're practicing it. And of course, always touch your handles, because they're never where you think they are. Look and locate you and your novices and students. So to wrap up my rambling, mistakes happen. We're not going to stop all the problems, but we can help prevent them, and we can help reduce the impact of them by being good coaches, good instructors. Preparation and review are key. If you're getting into a training or coaching scenario and you're not prepared, you're already behind the ball. Review with your novices and students what happened, good and bad. Make plans for the future, set good goals. Observe and debrief everything. They're probably paying for your skydive. They're probably paying dollars on top. They're paying for their own skydive, their own gear rental, probably packing. Like, this is an expensive thing for them. Make it worth their money, because ideally the people we're training this season are the people we're friends with by the end of the season. Okay, these aren't just products. They're not cows through a slaughterhouse. They're our community. We want to make them a part of a safe community. Don't forget the basics. The basics are important, and that's why they are the basics. We train people things like arching, like identifying malfunctions, like learning where their handles are early and upfront on day one, for the absolute reason that that's a foundation for safety. That's a foundation for good, safe skydiving. And just accept the fact that we are all, in fact, novices. There's always someone out there who we can learn from, and none of us are perfect. We should always be striving to be a better, safer skydiver, a better, safer part of the community, and a better, safer instructor who's creating safer skydivers. Oh, there we go. There's the last one. That's all I've got. I hope I've given you guys something to think about. I hope someone's got some questions. Or Bill, if you just want to go right to the shit talking, I've got 2 more beer and my drink's almost done. So
thank you so much, Danny. I know there was a wealth of information in there, and some people actually joined in partway through. Kanina's giving you an applause with the handshaking there.
ooh.
And I am just going to really quickly change something. There we go. So this is the time. I don't have any questions through on the chat, but to just remind you guys, if you do have a question, you can simply put it into the chat. If you want to just send it directly to me, you will send it to the Skydive Vancouver Island, which is the host. You can send it to that chat. By all means, you can also, if you go to the bottom of your Zoom tab, there's a little thing called reactions, and I'll just show you what it looks like. And you can actually raise your hand like that if you'd like to ask a question, and then you can lower it when you're all done. Again, Danny, thank you. So to the floor, do we have yes, there will be a link to the recording. I will be posting it and then posting it in the usual spots for everybody. It does take a few days just for me to do that. Is there any questions from the floor? Again, just raise your hands. I have a question from Kanina. I'm going to ask you to unmute. There you go.
Hi, Danny.
Hi, Kanina.
So I know that there's documents and whatever for getting recurrent for our instructor ratings. I've been off for a long time. Probably my last JM session was in 2018, and then I focused on the competition, and then COVID, and so on and so forth. So in addition to any of the documents that are out there, anything you would like somebody like me to make sure I take note of? And
so getting back into instructing and coaching after some time off, and it's a great question, and that goes back to one of the first slides. Get current, both with yourself, but get technically current. Get that technical refresher. What is it that the drop zone trains? What is the process? What is the wording? What does their routine look like? On the instructor side, you said JM. You said 2018, it is 2023, so you're approaching that 5-year mark there. So to get recurrent in that, you can find all that information online for all the ratings, for all the currency requirements. But for JM, you have to, I believe it's I just taught this the other week. You think it'd be on the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure it's dispatch a load of students under the direct supervision of an experienced jump master, right? Pull on the experience at the drop zone, get a refresher from them, have someone else who is current observe what you're doing. And by all means, don't make the first time touching a pilot chute in 5 years in the plane with the students. Do it on the ground. Do it with the other JM instructors. Do it with new JM instructors. Do it with experienced ones. Get familiar with the gear before you're familiar. You have to get familiar with the student, right? Do those effectively dirt dives with experienced jumpers, getting used to handling the gear, getting used to handling the student. Get back into your rhythm before you have to handle a real newbie. And in that regards, you know what? Make it easy on yourself. Find a person who's on their last clear and pull, someone who's actually comfortable climbing in and out of the plane, right? Make it easy on yourself to ease back into the process. Okay? There's nothing wrong with going slow. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There has been some questions about the postings of our past seminars and then this seminar. I've just been a tad bit busy. So yes, we'll be downloading a couple of the safety seminar, our safety day, and also the rigging one we'll be posting later on tonight. And then this one will take a few days, but we'll be posting them usually in the Facebook links that through Canadian Fun Jumpers and the Vancouver Island Skydivers. Do I have other questions out there? I know there's lots of people on here that have questions. Round them up. Danny, I have a question that I'm going to ask just because I wrote it down.
Excellent.
Okay, thanks. So we touched a little bit this on our safety day, but can you, and so I guess this is kind of a canopy collisions, and especially when we look at students and novices, one of the things that are often, we look at canopy collisions and we often talk about like upon opening, like when we open our parachute and stuff like that. Yeah. Whereas majority of fatalities with canopy collisions across North America in particular happen below 500 feet. So they're in landing patterns. Yeah. Is there any feedback, or, you know, these are obviously situations we don't want to get into in the first place, but any kind of thoughts you have regarding teaching to this, preparing, you know, obviously that clean space, and it doesn't matter whether you're jumping at a Cessna drop zone or a Skyvan drop zone, a Caravan drop zone. Is there anything you want to kind of touch in on that?
It's again, it's one of those sad truths of like, why are we even ending up in those scenarios, students or experience, right? It comes back to decision making, right? We and our students only end up in those situations due to some combination of decisions in terms of jump planning, spotting, break off, flying pattern that leads us to that, right? No one just magically ends up in a landing pattern canopy collision. It is a combination of likely poor decisions made by probably more than one person, but it could just be one set of poor decisions that lead you to that. So it constantly comes down to that decision making, that constant review of you're having your head on the swivel, you're looking for traffic, you're flying a predictable pattern, you're not approaching from some stupid direction against the wind. You're not solely focused on, I must land into the wind, it must be in that direction. What do you do if you see yourself in an imminent head-on collision on landing pattern? Flat turn to the right. Right? These are the things we can't really train them. It would be ridiculous of us to put to our students and novices in real world scenarios where they have to do these things. That would be unethical. But we have to mentally train them, talk them through it. Again, something like a flat turn is not an intuitive skill. That's why it's on the COP requirements, so that they have to be taught it. They have to practice it and execute it. And we should be reviewing it constantly, so that, again, when it's, oh shit, this is happening, what do I do? I'm about to hit that guy. I'm going to look to my right, make sure there's no traffic, and execute a flat turn. All we can do is train, review, test constantly. Make sure they are mentally prepared. Make sure they are technically prepared. Very often, in my opinion, and from what I've seen and reviewed, are injuries and incidents a result of, hey, I'm just unable to do something, right? I'm unable to flare. No, it's, I made a poor decision on my landing pattern. I made poor timing on my flare. I didn't know what to do. It's our job as coaches and instructors to fill in those gaps of, I don't know. Hopefully they never need to know that information, but we need to fill that spot of information so that when those situations do come up, they can make those decisions. Talk them through patterns, talk them through events with bigger planes, more canopies, tighter landing areas, higher winds, different winds, cross winds, landing in rain, sleet, snow, downsizing, upsizing, you name it, first two-way, first four-way. Talking them through those scenarios so that things aren't a surprise, so that they can hopefully make those good decisions early enough to either avoid those scenarios. I'm sure most of us here have been to Arizona and been like, yeah, no, fuck the grass, I'm going to the desert because those guys are assholes. Hopefully we prepared them with the ability to make that decision. I'm going to go crosswind out in the sand and land safe and dusty and walk back the extra half mile because it's better than hitting Buddy's canopy at 200 feet. As coaches and instructors, that's really all we can do. Is we have to train them. We have to talk to them. We have to prepare them because we can't put them in those scenarios to practice it. It's not a PFFI course. I can't have someone flip on their back and spend the next 5,000 feet trying to flip them over.
Excellent, thank you. So a question from the floor. Do you have any suggestions on working or dealing with fresh novices or students who have gone ahead and purchased gear over the winter and want to insist on starting the new season on their new gear?
Ooh, that's everyone. I was that student, that novice. Got it over the winter. I packed it over and over. It was probably a malfunction, let's be honest. But it's like, yeah, this is mine. I don't have to pay 20 bucks for it on this jump. I want to use it. It's a very exciting thing, and it sucks having to, be the bad guy. Like, no, maybe you shouldn't do it. It goes back to knowing your novice, knowing their currency, knowing where they're at, knowing what that gear is. I mean, if they went out and bought an identical gear to the student rigs that they've been jumping, great, go over with it. The C2 or a rigger, phone Bill, is this appropriate? Is this a good piece of gear? Bill loves talking about gear. You have to rely on your judgment as a professional, right? We're all in these seats as coaches and instructors, either because we have the knowledge and information to apply to these scenarios, or we know who to talk to, and hopefully we're humble enough to go do it. There's nothing wrong with going to ask questions of senior instructors, riggers, DCOs, DZSOs. So, I mean, if you run into this situation this year and you've got, your, let's say it's a 30 jump wonder, They have clearly haven't jumped all winter. If they've only got 30 jumps, they've just got their brand new 190 and they're used to jumping the 250. Be honest with them, be the bad guy. Hey, start with what you're used to, get comfortable with the sport again, and then we'll talk about what downsizing means. I'm sure we've all talked about downsizing year in, year out, and how we're all very aggressive with it and how it is so hard to get people to go slow. But just be the good coach about it. Be honest with them. It's not because we're trying to hold them back, because we want them to spend the rental gear and fill the DZO's pockets. No, we want them to jump that gear so that they can transition appropriately and, keep doing this all season so they don't have to sit in a wheelchair all through the season staring at their gear in the corner, not being jumped. There's a time, a place, and a process.
Excellent. Thank you. So another question this is actually for GCIs. If you have a student having a malfunction, what's your best feedback on the procedure that a GCI should be doing when you can see a student's having a malfunction? I think that's what the question is.
Yep. What were they taught?
Don't ask me.
That's just it. What were they taught? I would say very confidently that every FJC in the country.
No, I get this.
Yes, Bill?
Oh, yes.
I don't know. You started making sound. I thought you wanted to interject.
No, I'm trying to chat to you, but I'll do it
Oh,
later.
okay. So I'm very confident every FJC in the country is teaching their first jumpers to identify and handle malfunctions. And if they're not, and a drop zone that's doing this, feel free to send me a very anonymous email. Your students are taught to deal with it. Now, if they are taught to listen for the commands to cut away, great. If that's what they're taught, if that's what they're trained to do, if that's what they're tested on, great. I can't name a single drop zone, single GCI, single SSI in this country that trains people that way. Okay? First jumpers are taught to identify malfunctions and how to handle them. Your job as a GCI is honestly backup. Because another thing they're taught is how to fly the canopy, because it is so complicated to understand that when I pull right, I go right. When I pull left, I turn left. And when I pull them both, I slow down. And I want to land in that field. You're there as guidance for them, to keep them in check, to introduce them into the sport. You really don't need to be telling them to cut away. I honestly have never run into that scenario where it's been necessary. I've never heard of it being necessary, and I've never heard of it being taught. To give an extreme example, there are drop zones that have multiple students out on a single load, all on the same radio frequency with the same radio guy. And you can just picture the scenario of being jumper number 1, cut away, and you see jumper 2 and 3 and 4, and you watch the rigger's eyes light up as he's like, $80, $80, $80. Yeah. So they've been actually, Paige typed it out very nicely. They've been trained to identify and react. And then they do not react. And there's only one student in the air. As you're adding to the question page. That's a great question. It's hard. They're trained to deal with it. And if we're not confident putting them in the plane, then we haven't trained them and tested them well enough on the ground. You can do it. I mean, I'm not going to be there to hold your hand and say don't. But don't expect to have to do it. If you're concerned seeing a malfunction happen at any point and concerned that a student isn't going to deal with it, again, decision making. This is something that's happened that started brewing earlier on in the day. Were they trained enough? Were they tested enough? Did they prove 100% that they can identify and deal with malfunctions? are the instructors, the JMs, the PFFIs actually checking that the AEDs are turned on. From the IED programs, the chance of having a mal are so very, very slim. PFFI world, it's just the same as any other skydive, but they've got the time and training to deal with it. I've never have, and I never will encourage GCI or FJC program to teach cut away, cut away, cut away.
Cool. Thanks, Danny. I think you answered the questions that were in there. Does anyone else have any questions at the moment? Don't forget, you can go to your reactions tab to raise your hand, or you can type a message right into the chat for me. Danny, you're so smart. Nobody has questions.
No, everyone just thinks I'm ridiculous and they don't want me to keep talking, which is fine.
I don't think so. All right. It looks like all questions have been answered that nobody wants. Oh, well, it's really funny. There's a comment on there. It says, does suck less count as good coaching? Well, just on a personal side note, Gord will get a chuckle out of this, and I know Panina will. I have a very competitive daughter who's in high end sports, and our motto is suck less, do better. And that's what we cheer out. So there you go. Paige does have a question. Paige, do you want to unmute yourself? And you can certainly ask a question to Danny, especially about patterns. Landings are big issues.
Yeah, it's not really a coaching thing, but obviously it's good to have a good answer if it happens with a student. Last year at one of the boogies, I think it was a crosswind or the TET was coming around, stuff like that. And I was the first person down, but slightly low, just slightly lower than another person. And so we both came in opposite directions.
Yep.
I went with the way the wind had been going, and I think the TET was on a slight angle, so I kind of went with that.
Yeah.
And the other person came in on a different angle. Now I was slightly lower than them, and at first I didn't realize that they were going the other direction, but even if so, I might have been a little too low to kind of do a full turn and change my pattern setup. So if you got two people roughly the same altitude and they land up going opposite directions for landing pattern, do you have a recommendation on the best? Like, I tried to take my pattern long so I would land towards the other end of the field, because it was in Salmon Arm, and we have the two different landing, the really long landing area, right? So I just kind of took it and tried to land closer to the end I was at.
Yeah. So, I mean, it happens, right? We've all been at drop zones, whether it's 4 people in the air or 20 people in the air. Occasionally you end up with good old jousting, right? Default is always go back to what is the drop zone policy? Are we following the TET? Are we following the set direction? Are we following first one down? That's a whole other side of the conversation, right? In terms of what do you do in the scenario, like you've just described, we're both on level. There's no good information on the ground as to which way should be right. So how do we make that decision? And you both came across to opposite decisions. It happens. We've all seen it. We're all going to see it this year, unfortunately. It's again decision making, the tools in our technical pocket to deal with what's given to us. Having our heads on swivels, right? Just because you think you're the low person, you think you're the high person, you have to constantly be thinking about the traffic around you. Can you see all 19 other canopies, 3 other canopies, 1 other canopy, whatever it is? Are you aware of what they're doing? Of course, we're going to end up in physical scenarios where we can't possibly see everyone, but we have to be looking for them. We have to keep our head on a swivel, constantly thinking. Just because I look down, I see an arrow, I see a TET, I see a flag, and I'm making this decision, and I think I'm the low person, doesn't mean I'm 100% right. There could be someone, like you say, on level with me who didn't see me and making an opposing decision. When we're making all our turns, we're looking at where we're going. We're constantly looking about what's happening around us, because there's always elements out of our control. So if you're, you notice what's happening later on, so you decide to go wide, you decide to go long, you decide to just leave the landing area and go elsewhere. That's great, because honestly, one of my favorite sayings is, at break off, everyone's trying to kill you, because at that point, I need to get away, I need to get a parachute, and I need to get to the ground safely. So at that point, the skydive's over, and I just assume all of you are out to get me. So my head doesn't stop moving. I'm always updating my plan, my decisions, to hopefully help all of us walk away. I need to do something really rude. I need to really go run to the washroom. If you guys want to continue the conversation, I'll be back real quick.
I do have a question from Nesta next. I don't know if it's a question or comment, but we can wait for Danny to go have a quick pee. If anyone else has to have a quick pee, now's your time. And in fact, there's probably a lot of experience on here of answering questions as well. So
I'm just really excited that he actually turned his video off while he went pee. Personally.
that is very true. Very
We have
true.
to listen close to see
Hi,
if there's.
Bill Benny. Sorry, had to get that in.
Hello,
So,
Nesta.
yes, and Ben,
Been a very long
Bill,
time.
I have you next there too,
Right.
Bill. After wonderful Nesta.
You
Yay.
look awesome, Nesta.
Love you, Bill. We just have to have our love fest.
That is absolutely fair.
You remember the vibrating chairs?
Oh my goodness, this is still on recording, Bill.
Yeah, I have no idea.
It's all good. Yay.
Well, Danny's in
Want
the
me to add my-
Nesta's here. Can I interview? Hi, Nesta. I'm Kanina Vanstone, Jay Vanstone's wife. I haven't met you in person, but I know so many stories. Can you update us? What are you currently doing right now with your, whether it be your career or yeah, can we have a brief update?
I give Jay a big hug for me, and I'm skydiving with these guys over at SVI. Yay! Doing a bunch of PFFs last year, having a blast, teaching people the usual, and then all kinds of other things in between.
Anybody who's on this call who doesn't know Nesta, she's very, very popular and very, very
Stop. Now I have
Well,
to live up. Please stop.
It should be noted that Nesta taught Monique to do PFF. So that's I don't know if that's calling Nesta old or just calling her really well experienced in the industry. And we're very, very, very blessed to have Nesta as part of our team. So it looks like Danny's back. So Nesta, if you want to go ahead with your question, and then Bill, you'll be next after that.
Thanks for waiting.
No problem. Yeah, I was actually gonna say I actually IAD'd Monique too at one point when she had like, I don't know, 4 jumps, 6 jumps, something like that. So yeah, we go way back. Mine is a comment actually, Danny. And it's one of those things. I mean, I've been on the coaching working committee in the past as well, and one of those things that really I think gets missed, and something that instructors really need to know, and we need to reiterate with our students when it comes to doing emergency procedures, because we go over the emergency procedures that are at the first jump course or at the primary PFF, whatever we're teaching, or the tandem course, or however it's going down for everybody. But the problem is that I find we don't teach them 2 of them. When you go to solos, when you're going to pulling your own parachute, you need to know what a hard pull is. And you need to know what a horseshoe malfunction is. And you really need to tell them what they are, not just the try once, try twice, go for your reserve, which obviously we all should know, but we need to know this is a horseshoe malfunction. This is something that's attached to you. You still only get 2 tries.
Yeah.
So they know what it is.
Yeah.
Oh, I can identify this, and this is my action, reaction, and I think that's one that really gets missed. And so I'm very passionate about it because it got missed in my training and almost killed me. So,
And that's an excellent comment. And I know I didn't go in depth on it, but it's having that technical refresher for yourself, especially if you wear multiple hats on the drop zone. If you're an SSI, JM, GCI, C1, C2, you know, you're the person who's doing all the things. You have to remember what hat you're wearing and who you're working with and where they're at. Because just as Nesta said, that is on you to know, because they don't know what they don't know. That's your job to fill that gap. So first, free falls. You know, what is a hard pull? What is a horseshoe malfunction? What are all those things, right? Because that is, I mean, you may have the keen student who's poured through PIMS and watched videos and knows all that stuff. And if you found that student, consider yourself lucky. But let's be honest, most skydivers we know are not brilliant people. We need to fill in the gaps, know where they're at, know what they need to know. And if you're ever unsure, please ask Nesta. She loves to help. Ask me. I love to help. Rely on your seniors. Build that information. So much of our sport, especially on the coaching and development side, is built on mentorship, working with each other to help improve each other. But Nesta is 100% right. We tend to miss those little things because, I mean, when's the last time any of us saw a horseshoe malfunction outside of Friday Freakout? Exactly. Well, you're all muted, so you can't speak up anyways, but exactly. Don't be lazy with the training. We're not training people to the 99% of skydives. As far as safety is concerned, we're training them to that 1% for the chances, the things that don't happen. So be physically current and technically current.
And I think that's just the little one that gets missed because we all go back to, oh, yeah, let's go over your emergency procedures. It's the look, locate, punch right, punch left, whatever you're saying is, but we forget that they change as they progress a little bit. And that's just that one little tweak that I always like to mention. Thanks, Danny.
Yeah. Thank you, Nesta.
Thanks, Nesta. Bill, if you you got your hand up there, you can fire off your question.
So I have more of a.
Hi, Nesta. Nesta was my forward coach back in the early 90s.
I was 12. I was 12.
So
We both were.
So I have more to add to the canopy collision thing, if that's okay.
Please. I'm by no means the say-all end-all to information.
I find the canopy collision issue is at every level, from beginner to very, very experienced coaches, and we all want to land on the cool landing area, right?
Yes.
But if you go to most drop zones have a really large landing area. And as instructors and coaches, we need to land in those areas. So everyone that we develop and that we mentor, understand that landing there is just as cool as landing in the cool area. We need to remove the cool area in landings and just land your canopy safely. Places that move the swoop ponds away from the drop zone. So it's not cool anymore, right? They don't get used anymore, but that's a safe place to do this, right? So thanks for letting me get in there. Cool.
No, you're 100% right. That goes back to like we're as much as a lot of us are paid skydivers. We're professional skydivers. We're all novices. There's never a point in your career where you're not a novice. There's always stuff to learn, always stuff to practice. You may learn everything there is in the sport, but that doesn't mean you don't need to rehash it, retrain it, retest it. None of us are perfect, and most of us aren't brilliant. We're all novices. Keep it fresh. Don't get complacent. I guarantee we all have lost friends to complacency, and hopefully we can stop losing them to it, but don't let it happen. Be a good role model.
Excellent. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Bill. So final draw. Any other questions? I see none in my comment box and I see no one raising their hand. I'll just quickly scroll through my videos. No one's like.
Corey's got one about EPs. Has there been more research or high level discussion about punch left, punch right?
Look, locate.
Corey, you want to deploy your reserve before cutting away the malfunction? Is that what I'm reading?
Corey, you are welcome to unmute yourself. I can unmute you as well if you like.
I was trying to figure out how to unmute myself.
There you go. You can share your video too if you like.
No one needs to see that.
No, I'm naked. What did I type? Did I fuck that up?
Has there been more research or high-level discussion about punch left, punch right? Which to me sounds like
Yeah, I fucked that up.
All right,
No,
don't do or teach that, please.
Yeah. No, I agree. Definitely don't teach that. But like Nesta brought up the horseshoe mouth and stuff like that, and I remember hearing other instances, and after there was a certain incident in Salmon Arm actually where someone went in and there was kind of discussion about things after that, and I never really heard a solid answer on what should be taught for this instance. And is it always cut away no matter what? That's what I've been teaching and that's what I go with personally. But
are you talking specifically horseshoe or just in general always pulling?
Just in general, yeah, high speed mouth. Basically, if you have a high speed mouth or a horseshoe or anything like that.
Yeah, so I mean that's a great question, and I have a not simple answer for it. Is you have to consider who your student or novice is and where they are in their progression, right? For the solo situation, I'm a big fan of keep it simple. The horseshoe malfunction needs a couple extra specific steps. Apart from that, pull both handles. I was, what, 2 weeks ago now, not even, I had a total mouth. Bridle was routed incorrectly. There was no mane coming out. I just had that classic sport drogue bouncing behind me. No chance of a mane coming out whatsoever. Look, locate, right, left. Right handle did absolutely nothing. But it also required no thought at all to go boom, boom. It's a moment of your time. If you're that close to the ground that moment makes a difference, your AED should have taken over. But I'm a big fan of early on, keep it simple. Not having to add that extra step of, oh no, well, that's not a main out there, so I'm not going to need that. I only need the one handle. Realistically, it's not that long of a thought, but why have it? To your question, has there been high-level discussion or research into it? Not to my knowledge or in my committee. I don't know if the safety committee has considered it at all, but I lean back to keep it as simple as possible. The horseshoe malfunction requires extra steps. Apart from that, why complicate things? And that's my personal approach. That said, if you're teaching at a drop zone, consider what it is that they teach.
Awesome. Thanks, Danny. So a very good comment was made in this. You guys have kind of touched on this as well, but as students progress from first jump course to solo and beyond, they should be given increasing levels of awareness and training on EPs. And I know that Nesta's and yeah, we've kind of all touched on that as well. I appreciate that you also said, ask the drop zones, right? Where are you teaching? I know that at Skydive Vancouver Island, we definitely have EPs for students that are very straightforward. They're simple. Cut away. There was a question in here. Sorry. Just looking. Oh, yeah. So this was actually just more of kind of getting off the EP side, but also just reminding each other, coaches and instructors should work collaboratively, try to avoid shutting each other down with or through the students, novices, when or if something needs to be corrected. We all make mistakes and it's not the best way to address such things. Yeah, and I like to the person who said that to me. Yeah, I mean, Danny said it really well, and I love the fact that you mentioned about coaches and instructors landing good patterns. You don't have to swoop that stuff when you've got a student following behind you. But yeah, what we do out there is a reflection of what can be expected or not from a student, right? So how we treat each other is how they're going to treat other people and how, I mean, they're going to coach. And I want to go into this, Danny, when we're talking about the new novice student, what could you educate this whole crew on why it's a good idea to encourage people to get their Coach 1 rating?
Allison, why don't you tell me, because you just finished your Coach 1. What did you learn as a skydiver, as a DZO, taking your coaching rating? Not that you ever really wanted to coach a whole lot, but you wanted to know what was in there. What did you take from it? Yeah, I turned it around.
I did not mean that to turn around on me. Well, I got COVID. That was fun. No, just kidding. I'm not kidding, but what did I learn from Coach 1? Coach 1, well, actually, it built a little bit more confidence in myself as a skydiver. Primarily, just for those of you who don't know, I have watched more landings at all levels, probably than a lot of people that generally do. I watch all the landings at our drop zone and coach to a lot of them. So it definitely gave me, and I've been through a lot of different coaching courses, be it through volleyball, golf, hockey, ringette. But it was the benefits of it being specific to skydiving, obviously, how we communicate with each other, how people communicate with us, and those different learning techniques. But personally for myself, it was, I was going through some personal struggles within my own skydiving. And so it stepped outside of that. So I do strongly encourage others to take a Coach 1 course, because I think it challenges us to improve on our skydiving and our ability to communicate well with others and more of that awareness. That would be my personal thought on that. I know some people question whether or not we should be getting our Coach 1 ratings at such low jump numbers. Oh, Mike Drew just posted a really cool horseshoe. Scary. But I think there's benefits more into about communication than anything at all. Yeah. So that would be my thoughts on that.
Totally. I mean, the Coach 1 course, I actually teach it at work as a professional engineer, because it is not about skydiving. Very little about the Coach 1 course is about skydiving. It's about how to communicate, teach, observe, and evaluate. And you can apply that to everything you do in life. It's about understanding how adults learn and how to find peak performance and how to communicate goals and improvement and moving forward and finding information and taking in information. We do hear the argument that 50 jumps to become a coach, but let's be honest, you could coach as a Coach 1 just by watching video of other people. Like you almost don't need to be on the skydive, because you're just there to observe. That's the Coach 1's role. The content of it is about how we learn as adults, as skydivers. And I think that's beneficial to everyone in every aspect of life. I'll be honest, I was a shit skydiver until I became a coach. And then I was just a shitty skydiver who knew how to coach. And then it kind of went from there. But it was only after that personally for me, I realized what other coaches were trying to do, and the light bulb went off. Again, skydivers aren't brilliant, myself included. There's a lot of really good information there. And heck, if you have zero interest in becoming a coach, the C1 manual is available online. None of this shit's a secret. It's just skydiving.
Awesome. So I don't think that I have any more questions. So I know that we often stay on the call for a little bit afterwards, so we will do that. But I'm going to be thanking Danny. Danny, I know that you lost your partner, Dan, in all of that. And apparently do I have one more question? Somebody just said I had one more question. So you got one more? Don't forget Nick. Nick, do you have a question? Do I have a question from Nick? I don't know. I don't see it.
I don't see a Nick in here. I don't know. I'm not in charge.
Danny, awesome.
Thank you, Bill. That's
awesome.
That's how you do a safety seminar, Bill. Just one.
That's how you do it.
Yeah, anyways, I don't see it. Anyways, sorry.
Oh, I'm heartbroken.
I know. Maybe it'll
Remember this.
maybe it'll come up afterwards. Anyways, Danny, thank you so much. And I know that Dan kind of bailed on you there. We got the last minute notice. I always appreciate the time that you spend to support and educate others. It truly is inspiring for me to see that you dedicate a lot of time to this. And secondly, for those of you that are sorry. So for those of you that are enjoying these safety seminars next week, so next Tuesday at 5:00, same time, Zoom meeting. This one is for tandem instructors. And I'm super excited to have Eric. So it's for UPT Vector Sigma tandem instructors, although lots of knowledge from both. Erica Dufour will be joining us, as well as John Curran. The really cool thing that they have done, we have actually done a side presentation that will be launched hopefully by the weekend regarding all the EPs around tandem. So specific emergency procedures, there's a separate video for that. The seminar that we're going to have on Tuesday is all about, landings, because guess what? That was the AIM reports and what we saw. Lots of landing issues with our tandems. So if you're a tandem instructor, also camera flyers, if you fly camera for tandems, this is definitely a meeting you want to be part of. That's next Tuesday. The following and the final seminar on our Safety Day seminar series for Skydive Vancouver Island will be all about creating a safe skydiving culture and a community at drop zones and other drop zones and where you travel. So yours truly will be presenting on that. A lot of information that I drew from the PIA this year. And we will have a guest speaker as well, hopefully. She's just working out some schedules with travel. So that'll be the last Tuesday of the month. Again, thank you very much, Danny. Thank you to all of you guys who attend. These wouldn't be possible without you guys. And I appreciate everyone's time. I am going to stop the recording and then we can have a sidebar chat. Thank you again.